thank you very much, Mr. Erck. So we are going to start with the questions from the members. I recall that it's 1 minute slot each, and I count on Esther De Lange to set the bar. And I think as a Dutch, you will do it properly. So let's, Esther, 1 minute for you.
Questions to AstraZeneca. 1. AstraZeneca entered into the production of the so-called Oxford vaccine in May 2020. At that time, were there any pre-existing contracts that linked production facilities situated in the EU to the United Kingdom? For example, contracts concluded by the Oxford Consortium that incorporate EU production facilities into the production chain for UK deliveries. Second question, were the grants from the British government received by this Oxford Consortium conditional on the use of EU production for UK deliveries or on the non-delivery from UK production facilities to the EU? And if there were no pre-existing obligations or conditionality, and given the fact that the EU and the UK contracts are comparable in terminology and more or less signed at the same time, why did the company decide to drop deliveries to the EU by 60% in Q1 and not to other parts of the world? Did you knowingly enter into contractual obligations you knew you could not or never deliver on to all parties? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christian Heller for the EPP.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're living in nervous times, and being a former CEO of a biotechnology center, I think politics should formulate at that given moment that we really convey, that we really appreciate your efforts. It's unseen before. I know the complexity of production. So my questions are directly related to that. Given that the quality control represents substantial amount of manufacturing time, where could we speed up without sacrificing safety and quality standards? Are the rules and regulations that could be harmonized or standardizations across Europe to help to speed up production and distribution? Which legal impediments are you facing inside the EU and outside the EU that slow down a smooth production or distribution process? And in more general terms, next month the WTO will decide on the requested waiver of IP rights. I understand this is not your preferred option, but what would be the preferred option? Because we are looking now to the production ordered of the EU, we are looking then to the production which might be needed to cope with the virus. But Europe and the United States are the drugstore of the world. So how do you cope with the amount of doses we will need?
Thank you, Christian. Who are you? Which panelist are you asking your question to? Okay, so let's move to Pascal Soriot, because the question from Mr. De Lange was addressed to you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. De Lange. So to answer your question, when we entered the agreement with Oxford in May 2020, we inherited a number of contracts that were novated to us. It's important to know that Oxford University started the development of this vaccine back in January last year, just like every other company did. And the UK government became involved very early on, maybe in January or February, and funded the development of the vaccine, and also funded the capital investment required to scale up manufacturing at facilities in the UK, but also in the Netherlands. And so they, of course, entered agreement with those companies. When we signed the contract with Oxford, all these agreements were novated to us. So the UK actually, of course, granted a lot of money to Oxford University to develop the vaccine, and also, as I said, funded the capital investment required to manufacture the vaccine in the facility of our partner in the Netherlands. The reason why our supply is lower than we expected is very simple. Is to do with a lower yield, lower productivity than we expected. Unfortunately, the the manufacturing of a vaccine is a very complex biological process that involves thousands of elements to track, and it requires a learning phase. And some sites have ramped up very quickly, and other sites have been a little slower. And so this question of yield has impacted our ability to deliver the volume we were looking for the EU. I can tell you though that the overwhelming majority of what is manufactured in the EU, including the Netherlands facility, is actually going to EU supply.
Okay, so are you happy with the answers? Okay. So we move to the second set of questions from S&D Group, Jutta Götterlund.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the CEOs for being here. First, two questions to AstraZeneca. Although invoking best reasonable effort, it is unacceptable that the shortfall is of a magnitude of above 60% of the agreed quotas from December 2020 to March 2021. In that regard, exactly how will AstraZeneca ensure that such shortcomings is urgently remedied? I don't think we got an answer to that. And how does AstraZeneca explain the export of vaccine produced in the EU to the UK, but at the same time, the company is not willing to ship vaccine from the production site in the UK to the EU, although these are very specifically mentioned in the APA? Allegedly, the EU is supposed to receive vaccine doses from the Indian production site instead. I would like to hear what you have to say about that. And then to Moderna, I would like to hear about practical solutions and synergies you can foresee to strengthen the cooperation between the companies so that vaccine production can increase. I think we got answers to that from the others, but I'd like to hear more from you on that.
Thank you very much. Then Nika.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. Pentru Moderna și CureVac am două întrebări concrete. Ați fi dispuși să dați acces sau să asigurați transferul de tehnologie cu scopul de a stimula producția și de a crea o mai bună utilizare în comun a capacităților de producție din Uniunea Europeană, eventual în colaborare cu statele membre? Și dacă da, care sunt planurile dumneavoastră concrete în acest sens, mai ales odată cu apariția noilor variante de COVID-19? O altă întrebare. Care este concret pentru fiecare dintre dumneavoastră eficacitatea vaccinurilor, nu eficiența, deci eficacitatea în lumea reală a acestor vaccinuri față de noile variante și vă rog să referiți față de varianta din Marea Britanie, braziliană și sud-africană și cât estimați că durează dozele care în prezent au fost administrate a vaccinurilor, această imunitate, cât durează ea? Și acest lucru este extrem de important pentru toți cetățenii Uniunii Europene, pentru că toți doresc ca să aibă o evaluare corectă și precisă a acestor informații care sunt vitale pentru succesul campaniei de vaccinare și vă cer tuturor să vă îndepliniți angajamentele asumate și să aveți un comportament corect. Vă mulțumesc!
Thank you. So we start again with Pascal Soriot for AstraZeneca.
Thank you so much. So the first question relates to best reasonable effort and what we will do. And I can tell you our team, we have thousands of people working 24/7 to address these issues. We have, of course, our engineers working with our partners to improve yield. We have sites sharing knowledge across the network. And essentially, what we are working on is improving the yield, and as our teams learn from each other and improve their knowledge, the yield is increasing. So in Q2, we are very confident that the yield will increase across the network. So that's one thing we are working very hard on, is improving the yield, the productivity of each site. The yield is actually the number of doses of vaccine that you extract out of 1 liter in your bioreactor. We have bioreactors that have 1,000 liters or 2,000 liters. And depending on how many doses of vaccine you get per liter, then of course it influences the number of vaccines you can produce. And the yield varies from a factor of 1 to 2 between sites. So one aspect is this. The second aspect is our supply network is set up regionally with an essential focus on each region, but we also manage it globally, like any pharmaceutical company. We manage our network globally, and so we are looking at other sites around the network, helping to produce vaccine and supply it to the European community, so that by Q2 we actually catch up to the volume that we had projected originally to produce. And those sites will be a variety of locations around the world, including the United States and some others. In terms of the efficacy, if I can cover also this question, our vaccine in our clinical trials has shown an efficacy of 100% against hospitalization and severe disease. And this has been confirmed in real-world evidence now. A Scottish study in 1.1 million people vaccinated, essentially older people, more than 60, and a large number above the age of 80. This study showed a 94% reduction of hospitalization. So as you can see, very much confirming the 100% or so that we got in clinical trials. And in the clinical trials, if you look at the totality of the disease, because when you look at COVID, you have to look at severe disease, hospitalization, and then overall disease, including moderate cases of disease. If you give the vaccine at 2 doses at 3 months interval, because in the case of our technology, the dosing interval influences the efficacy. The 2 doses at 3 months interval give a 92% protection against cases of moderate and severe disease. But again, close to 100% in real life against hospitalization and severe disease.
Thank you very much. So I now give the floor to the Moderna CEO, Stéphane Bancel.
Could you please press the speak button?
Sorry. So if you look at the situation of Moderna, when the pandemic started last year, we had only 800 employees, and we had no manufacturing operation in Europe. I was worried about nationalism and restriction of export. And so what the team did is build a supply chain that is 100% relying on partnership. The drug substance is made in Switzerland, in Lonza, which is the largest contract manufacturers for pharmaceutical products in the world. And the filling is made in Rovi in Spain, which is also a partner, and Decifarm in France, starting very soon. And the distribution for the shipment is done out of Belgium with yet another partner. And that was very important for us. The thing that is very difficult with mRNA for Moderna, but all the mRNA players, is that there's never been an mRNA product approved in the world before the Pfizer BioNTech and the Moderna vaccine approved earlier this year or in December in the US. And so you cannot go to a company and have them start right away to make mRNA product. They don't have the equipment. In Lonza, we had to spend 2 or 3 months basically destroying the room and rebuilding the room because the size of the equipment and the setup of the room was different. And so it is not easy to do that with new partners because there is no capacity. As you know, no large pharmaceutical companies in Europe or in Asia or in the US has done mRNA before. And so they don't have the equipment, they don't have a trained workforce. And because of the safety and the quality of a vaccine, which is critical, there is a lot of processes for training, for validation of the equipment, and that takes a lot of time, sometimes months. So that's for the first question on the partnership. On the variant question, what we published scientifically recently is the Moderna vaccine for the strain first identified in the UK has the same level of antibody. So we believe that the protection will be the same as what we see with the original strain of the virus. For the first variant identified in the Republic of South Africa, we have seen a drop that we reported scientifically in the level of antibody. But what is good news is that that drop is still above the level of antibody seen in people that are convalescent with a natural infection. So we believe that we should provide protection against that strain from South Africa. The piece that is unknown, which is your other question on duration, is long-term duration. As you know, the big efficacy studies, at least ours, started in July 27 of last year. So we don't even yet have 1 year of data. This is a multi-year study for which we're, of course, monitoring and regularly publishing updates of the study efficacy. And it's the same for all the vaccine. The challenge of a pandemic, unlike a typical vaccine, is we do not have the ability to have years and years of clinical data to know. So we'll have to just monitor and potentially boost people, especially the elderly and people with comorbidity. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to the last answer from CureVac, Mr. Haas.
Could you please press the speak button?
Sorry, could you repeat the question because the translation system didn't work at the time when the question was stated? Sorry about that.
It was a question regarding the efficacy of your vaccine.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, what we've been seeing in our phase 1/2 was a high. Well, the trials in the phase 1 and 2 is not designed to have a readout on the efficacy. Though what we can say is that the antibodies, what we could see is exactly in the range, on the one side, in the range of convalescent subjects, which these are the protective antibodies. And the other one, what we have been seeing is that the ratio between the antibodies is exactly, in our vaccine, is exactly 1-to-1 what we have been seeing in the natural infection, which we see as a quality stamp. And on the basis of these data, we entered into the phase 2b and 3, where we are now waiting for the data to come and provide exactly that. What we could see, it's a double-blinded study. What we can see so far is, without having deep-blinded, of course, the study is that we see a drop of the cases. The cases is exactly by definition of these subjects which are included in the trial, which then catch COVID-19 infection, that you see that there is a drop. But we will see what the data will bring, and therefore there cannot be any promises. However, on the variants, we are certainly doing testings as well, and we just received these data, which we are going to publish soon, that we see that with the UK strain, so the strain which has been first discovered in the UK, as well as the South African strain, we see a very nice protection. This is a preclinical study, an animal study, where we see 100% protection, and these data will be published soon. So our expectations on the clinical trial, what we are seeing at the moment, and this is certainly in areas where different strains are already existing, that we expect a high efficacy of these clinical trial data as well, which then would lead into, hopefully on the basis of these data, into an approval, where I said this would be expected to be in June.
Thank you so much. We'll try to accelerate a little bit, and we have a kind request, myself and Pascal, not to ask questions to all 4 distinguished guests, maybe just pick 1 or 2 in order to be as effective as possible. We go to the Renew group now and to the 2 coordinators. First, Mr. Niels Torvalds.
Thank you, Chair. We are, of course, interested in the future of the virus, and that's not for genealogical reason, even if we are very, very distant relatives of COVID-19. I think there is a great possibility or probability that we will see the COVID-19 go around for the next years or the next decades. And therefore, one of the questions which have been discussed here in the Parliament is an open source approach to the question of medicines, antiviral medicines. When the open source movement started in 1991, the big companies were very reluctant. Today they have understood that the open source is actually helping them. The same insights could also help you. And I would like to have an answer from Stan Erck. We wouldn't like to leave our American friends today on the outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Torvalds. I invite Martina Labaeva to take the floor, ITRE coordinator Renew.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Well, please allow me to reinstate that Renew is firmly behind the joint procurement effort led by the Commission. This approach will ensure that no one is left behind. And of course, we need as well cooperation among Commission, national authorities and companies to overcome bottlenecks in supply. I think that we are partners and we are facing the same challenge, so we have to work on it together. I have a question directed to CureVac and Novavax, because I want to look a little bit more at the future. I would ask you if you are already looking at the process Moderna described to extend cooperation with the existing supply chain in Europe. And with this, I mean not only companies who don't produce their own vaccine, but they have necessary equipment and facilities, but as well a wider cooperation in Europe, as well in bottling, labeling and logistics, let's say. So what are your plans? Because now we really need to show the trust to our citizens. Their citizens need to trust and they need to see that we have clear plans for extending the production and accelerating it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martina. I go now to Mr. Stan Erck to respond both to Mr. Torvalds and Madame Labaeva. Mr. Erck, just press the speak button.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the questions. To respond to the first question, I believe that the question was about open source and making data available. I think the industry and we have been very open with publications of all of our data, and I agree that publication from everybody's data teaches us how the vaccines work. I think that when Moderna and Pfizer first published their data on efficacy in their phase 3 trial and got in the mid-90s as far as efficacy, I think that was a lesson for all of us that what we were doing was on the right track, and I think that gave us a lot of confidence to proceed as rapidly as possible. So that's been very helpful. I think with respect to the question about the future and extended cooperations with Novavax specifically, we have actually gone, like my colleagues at Moderna, where we started a year ago with 0 manufacturing capacity. We now have 27 agreements in place in 7 European countries, and so we have expanded our capacity dramatically and on a global basis, and anticipating that borders could be closed at some point. We set up capacity in Europe, in India, in the U.S., and in Asia, and in Korea and Japan. So we've got global capacity, and we think the capacity is sufficient to meet the needs for the foreseeable future.
Thank you so much. I go now to CureVac, Mr. Haas or Mr. Anthony Blanc, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Yes, we are actually, as we speak, we have got around about 20 partners in Europe with regard to the pDNA production, with regard to the mRNA production, with regard to the LNP, this is a formulation, the lipid nanoparticle production, and all of those more than 1 up to 5 partners. And then the filling finish, the labeling, packaging, as well as the diluent production. And all of what we do, yes, we are producing since 2006 mRNA already on a GMP crate to run clinical trials. But as I said, this was until last year all homeopathic. And we have got a new manufacturing facility which can just by itself produce 1 billion dosages on the 12 microgram per dose, what our current vaccine is, and the next generation will be even lower. So that's a kind of technology is driving force. for covering the variants, but also thinking about multivalent vaccines, because I agree COVID will stay around for a while, and nobody knows really whether it's going to further mutate or stays as a seasonal vaccine. And therefore, the collaboration all over Europe is certainly essential as well. And then certainly there is a collaboration also out of the box with where we are producing and developing a micro factory, which is mobile, which you then can bring there as well. This is an affiliated company which has been acquired by Tesla, where we said we need to have also quick and fast manufacturing units in order to cover perhaps even regions where a virus is breaking out, a variant where you really can also take action to help the virus spreading around. And what we are doing certainly here in Europe, which is all in Europe at the moment, is a blueprint to bring it all over the world as well, and in order to find the next vaccine as well, because there is no doubt that the entire world needs to be vaccinated, and we have got the technologies in our hand. And all what we are doing right now for COVID-19 is a preparation for pandemic outbreak preparedness.
Thank you so much. I go now to ID Group, and I invite first Madame Simona Baldassare.
Grazie Presidente. Dobbiamo constatare purtroppo come il progetto di vaccinazione europeo sia fallito e così raggiungeremo un'immunizzazione sufficiente fra 3 anni. I dati della distribuzione delle dosi sono impietosi. Israele ha già vaccinato l'85% delle persone, gli Emirati Arabi il 56%, il Regno Unito il 27% e gli Stati Uniti il 19%, e l'Unione Europea è fanalino di coda con appena il 6%. Questi numeri non sono accettabili anche di fronte all'incombere delle varianti. È evidente che è necessaria una nuova strategia di vaccinazioni. Il punto centrale questa volta deve essere la produzione. Dobbiamo mirare a una condivisione delle licenze per stabilire una produzione interna europea. In Italia, ad esempio, il governo sta portando avanti col Ministero dello Sviluppo Economico un progetto per cercare di fare sistema con le industrie farmaceutiche ed organizzare una produzione interna. La domanda è rivolta ad AstraZeneca. Qual è la vostra strategia per la condivisione dei brevetti al fine di aumentare la produzione interna agli Stati membri dei vaccini? Grazie.
Grazie molto. J'invite maintenant Madame Joëlle Melen. Je vous en prie.
Ma question est à Monsieur Bancel. Monsieur, votre laboratoire Moderna, comme ceux qui ont utilisé la méthode de l'ARN messager, a pu tout en même temps utiliser les travaux très anciens et avancés et antérieurs à l'épidémie de SARS-CoV-2 et faire chevaucher les différentes phases ordinaires des essais. Ainsi, semble-t-il, vous auriez commencé à faire les premières injections sur l'homme dès le 16 mars, soit 10 semaines après le début officiel de la pandémie. Pourtant, comme tous les Européens, je ne peux que regretter le décalage préjudiciable entre les effets d'annonce et certaines promesses manifestement impossibles à tenir et la réalité de diffusion des vaccins en Europe. Pour être pragmatique, monsieur, comment comptez-vous anticiper au mieux une production de masse pour lutter contre une crise par définition imprévue, mais surtout inconnue? Et comment, plus généralement, comptez-vous fournir au plus tôt aux États membres la liste des médicaments de crise dits critiques, au-delà des investissements et des partenariats renforcés? Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie beaucoup. I will give now the floor to Mr. Pascal Soriot, CEO AstraZeneca, to respond to the first question.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question, very important one. We decided to manufacture and distribute this product at no profit, so we are as close as you can get to a network that is totally open. As it relates to IP, sharing these patents, the issue in this case is really not so much about sharing patents, it's about scaling up to large manufacturing capacity. And in fact, as you heard all my colleagues, the entire industry is working 24/7 to scale up and increase capacity. But it is important to understand that to manufacture in additional sites, you have to teach the site how to manufacture the vaccine. So we do what is called the technology transfer. We send our engineers to a site to explain to people how to manufacture the vaccine. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time to explain. It takes a lot of time to test, validate the work that is done in this site. So it's not that easy to add sites. People having access to our patents would not help them much if they didn't know how to manufacture the vaccine. We have to teach them. And I can tell you our people, our teams are absolutely stretched to the maximum. There's no way they could train any more people. We have trained lots and lots of sites, and they could not train more people. And I'm sure it's the same for all my colleagues. Their teams are stretched to the maximum. So I really think the issue is not an issue of patents, it's an issue of capacity and manufacturing capacity around the world, and we are all working to increase it as quickly as we can.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sorio. I give the floor now to Mr. Bancel, Stefan Bancel.
Thank you very much for the question. So manufacturing usually takes 3 to 4 years to build manufacturing before product launch. The challenge we have as an industry, which is why you are seeing from all the companies startup problems, is that our teams have worked non-stop 7 days a week for a year now to get the manufacturing ready to do what was believed to be unthinkable, which was to be ready for a new product in a year. And so because we are still improving the productivity of different manufacturing processes, what we are seeing is what I would call hiccup startup issues, which are very typical in any industry, whether you make cars or airplanes or pharmaceutical products, you have startup issues. Things like we had a few weeks ago, a pump broke on a weekend. And the team spent several days non-stop, they worked during the night as well, to replace the pump. But because we have to make medicine, safety and quality is non-negotiable. And so in the industry, the regulators, rightly so, ask us to document that the qualification of that equipment, in that case the pump, was in accordance to what the pump was designed for. And so then you have to do a lot of validation, qualification, and then you have to document everything so that we are sure that the pump, in that case, is able to make production again. And so because we run non-stop, the days we lost to replace the pump and the days we lost for the documentation that the new pump was functional as designed for the process, for the safety of a product, that time we lost forever. Because as we run non-stop, all the days you don't make product, you cannot catch up because you run non-stop. And that's the issues you are seeing across the industries, is there is no inventory to manage those type of startup issue. And every time there is a human error, an equipment breaking, or as we had the question earlier, a raw material from one of our suppliers late by a day, you cannot start making the product because it will not be safe and you will not have the right quality. So that's the issue the industry is having, and the output is improving. And I'm sure it's the same with all my colleagues on the panel. If you look at the data month by month, the input is improving. The quantity of product we can make every month is going up. And I can anticipate it's still going up and accelerating because of the learnings that the teams are having. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move to the next two questions from the Greens, starting with Bas Eickhout. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't see myself, but okay, I'll start. Thank you very much. To AstraZeneca, on the contracts, because it's still not clear. You said there were prior agreements from Oxford University with the British government already dating January, February 2020. However, some of the production sites in the UK contract are also in the UK production line, are also in the EU production line. So how did you explain this during the negotiations for the EU contract, where it's saying that contracts with third parties like the UK should not hamper any of the production? And that is still not clear. Please be clear on that. To CureVac, because we want to look at the global production. In the CureVac contract that I read, you are explicitly demanding prior consent before a European country is giving, can donate vaccines to NGOs or even World Health Organization. Why are you demanding prior consent from that? Because it will hinder global production. Thank you.
Thank you. Villiers Ninisto for the Greens.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we all want mass production to go forward and our populations to get vaccinated. But obviously, we have been told by several of you manufacturers that there are production problems that are cause of the delay for the EU countries. But last year, the EU pumped several billion euros into the agreements with the companies, including money for ramping up production facilities. So our question is whether these commitments are upheld from the company's side in an equal basis. And another thing I would like to ask is, could you explain if there is indeed a secondary market of vaccines, as has been rumored? We have rumors that some brokers are selling vaccines, considering the manufacturers say that they sell vaccines only to the governments. Can you explain how there is a secondary market according to these rumors, and how is the situation about your own vaccine? And another thing, if we look at the global access to vaccines, the WHO's CTAP program has insofar not been used by any of your technologies and vaccines. How do you explain that you are not part of the CTAP program in opening technology and making sure that vaccines are globally available? Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't have the time to give the floor to all the panelists, so we will focus on AstraZeneca and CureVac. Pascal Soriot, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Ekut. The first question you asked relates to the agreement, and indeed there was an agreement with several agreements signed by the UK government with manufacturers. One is in the Netherlands, one is in the UK, and we are actually sharing, because essentially the Netherlands manufacturer was reserved originally by the UK, and in fact that manufacturer is supplying Europe today. So there is definitely sharing. The issue we have faced, as I explained, is the low yield we reached in some of the sites that are supplying the EU. But there's absolutely sharing. And I think it's also important to remember that the supply chain serving the UK is geared to supply 65 million people who live in the UK. The European community has about 450 million people, I believe. So, you know, the UK, even if we took the entire supply of the UK, it would not make a huge difference to the European community. So there is sharing. That's absolutely clear. And what is made in the EU, as I said before, overwhelmingly stays in the EU, including the site in the Netherlands that was originally reserved by the UK. As far as the money, the commitments, we will deliver on our commitments. The money we've received so far has gone directly to suppliers, either to buy material or alternatively to reserve capacity in this industry. You have to pay what is called a reservation fee to a manufacturer. So you reserve the capacity they have and you pay them in advance, and that's standard in the industry. And finally, as it relates to secondary markets, there is absolutely no secondary market as we are concerned. We supply our vaccine as it comes directly to governments. But as Stefan Bancel said before, the issue we face is that there's no inventory whatsoever. Typically in our industry, you build inventory, and there's always variations that happen in the manufacturing process. But if you have inventory, you can continue supplying the market in a continuous manner. But here there's no inventory. So each time there is a problem in manufacturing, then immediately you feel the impact at the customer level. And that's a challenge. We need to build inventory, but we can't, because we basically send everything we manufacture immediately.
Thank you. For the CEO of CureVac now, please. The floor is yours.
Listen, I will take the answer for the global access. So global access is really important, of course, to CureVac as well. And we see COVAX as a great facility to enable that. And we have certainly contributed doses into the tender that has been made by COVAX. We've also, as to the other question, explicitly agreed to resale and donation clauses in the contract that you alluded to. And in fact, some of these clauses have been exercised with contracts signed onwards to Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland, for instance. And in terms of these, the reason we've asked for prior consent is to be sure that the conditions are in place in terms of good distribution practices and GMP conditions of transfer of the vaccine even into the country where our vaccine is meant to be moved on and donated from Europe, so that the quality and safety is not compromised. So this is why we have put in this clause.
Thank you. So now we move to the next two questions from the ECR group, starting with Alexander Vondra.
Thank you, Pascal. I do have the two quick questions to Novavax, to Stan Erck. Firstly, according to our information, the process of approval in the UK, it's faster again than in the EU, the same like with the other vaccines. So can you share with us as the MEP some opinion, why this is so slow in EMA, and whether there is some advice where we should press the EMA to move forward? And secondly, it's about the money. It costs a lot of money for the research and development. Can you give us at least some rough numbers how much you were able to raise in the United States, including the capital market on one hand, and how much you were able to raise in Europe, including EU and the member states on the other hand, and whether it makes a difference? Thank you.
Thank you. Beata Sidlo.
Dziękuję bardzo za przedstawione informacje. Mam konkretne pytanie do przedstawiciela AstraZeneki. Pytanie może być tylko jedno w tym momencie. Kiedy Państwo wywiążecie się ze zobowiązań, które zostały podjęte? Zostały podpisane umowy, kraje się przygotowały, ludzie czekają, budzono nadzieję, a tymczasem nie ma szczepionek. I myślę, że dzisiaj dla nas wszystkich najważniejsze jest to, żeby AstraZeneca przedstawiła również harmonogram dostaw na drugi kwartał. Na to czekamy. I myślę, że trzeba postawić też pytanie do Komisji Europejskiej. Co prawda to dzisiaj mamy nieco inny format naszej dyskusji, ale jest też przedstawiciel Komisji. Co Komisja Europejska ma zamiar zrobić, ażeby wyegzekwować podpisane umowy? Bo jeszcze raz powtórzę, dzisiaj przede wszystkim liczy się czas. Europejczycy czekają na dostawy szczepionek, państwa są przygotowane, właśnie odbywa się szczyt Rady Europejskiej, przywódcy dyskutują o tym, co można zrobić, a więc pytanie również i do przedstawicieli producentów. Jak możemy Państwu pomóc, żeby Europejczycy otrzymali należne im szczepionki? Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. I will give the floor to Stan Erck for Novavax and to Pascal Soriot for AstraZeneca, starting with Stan Erck.
Yeah, thanks again for the questions. So approval in the UK faster than the EU. I think we are first applying to the MHRA in the UK because that's where we ran our trial. And so all of the data that goes to support the application for approval in the UK is actually being shared with the EMA. So I can't predict the timing of EMA approval, but they're getting the data in real time. And as for that matter is the FDA and other regulatory agencies. So we start with the UK because we ran the trial, the phase 3 trial in the UK, but everybody's getting the data at the same time. And for me, it's impossible to predict exactly the timing of the approval for EMA, but obviously it's a very high priority for us. And then the second question was about raising money. We were able to raise money. Actually, the first money that we raised to support this program was from a group called CEPI, which is a non-for-profit organization funded by a number of European governments and the Gates Foundation. And we received a grant for almost $400 million from CEPI to start the program. And that got us in the place where we could start setting up this international group of manufacturing sites and start working with, for that matter, the Serum Institute to make sure that we had global access to our product in low and middle income countries at the same time that high income countries would get it. On top of that, you asked the question how much we raised in the U.S. We did sign a contract with Operation Warp Speed with the U.S. government, to support our program in the U.S. for $1.7 billion. And that obviously is being used to run. We just finished a phase 3 clinical trial in the U.S. So,
thank you, Pascal Soriot.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. The supply schedule, we are working 24/7 really to improve our delivery and hopefully catch up to the expectation for Q2. As I said before, we are looking at improving yields and also leveraging our global supply chain, but it takes time, and it is important to understand that the yield is improving as people learn and become more familiar with the manufacturing process. I think Stefan said it earlier, you have often startup issues, whether you manufacture cars, planes, anything, vaccines, of course, you often have issues when you start the manufacturing. And typically in our industry, we have years to learn the manufacturing process, refine it, test it, improve it. And we do this in parallel to the clinical development. Here, we didn't have that time. We didn't have that luxury. We had 6 months to prepare for the launch and manufacture. So the alternative, of course, would have been to be ready later, but it would have taken more time. So that's basically the challenges we're facing. And it takes time to clarify what kind of hope we can have for the yield improvement and also leveraging our global supply chain. In terms of funding, we got funding from the US government for the development of the vaccine. And other than that, we didn't get funding for the development of the vaccine in Europe. The money we received in Europe was for the manufacturing of the vaccine, which, as I said a minute ago, that money went straight to buying materials or paying for contract manufacturing organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Soriot. The last part of the dialogue with the 4 CEOs. We go now to the left group, and I invite Madame Silvia Modig.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for all the CEOs being present today. Question to AstraZeneca. Mr. Soriot, you're like a piece of soap. It's impossible to get a hold of you. How is it possible that you had no clue of your production capacity? Because what has happened is not a minor setback, it's a huge failure. So I will ask it in this way. How can you assure us that we can trust you in the future to keep your part of the agreements and deliver what you have promised? To Moderna, I would like to ask that you have been open to suspending patents. I want to thank you for this constructive approach. But as we know, the patents is not enough if there is not technology and the know-how and knowledge to use it. So what are you willing to share this as well? And what are you willing to commit to in terms of tech transfer? And the last to the CureVac. Also, as my colleague Mr. Eickhout already mentioned, the resale chapter in your APA is very concerning. If your worry is that the quality of the vaccine being redistributed will be sufficient, then it should have been written that way. It's not written that way. It just gives you the right to have prior consent to what the EU does.
Thank you so much. I go to Madame Marisa Matias, please. Marisa.
Obrigada, Presidente. As minhas perguntas são para a AstraZeneca. Numa entrevista ao jornal da La República, de 26 de janeiro, o senhor acusou a Comissão Europeia de ter negociado tarde os contratos. Disse mesmo que a Comissão Europeia negociou os contratos 3 meses mais tarde do que o Reino Unido. No entanto, de acordo com a informação pública que temos, é que parece que o que é verdade é que o contrato com o Reino Unido foi fechado apenas alguns dias depois do contrato com a União Europeia estar fechado. E a minha primeira pergunta é porque é que mentiu ao público e se essa mentira é apenas para desresponsabilizar nas falhas das entregas e da produção por parte da sua companhia. A segunda pergunta tem a ver com o seguinte. Segundo o que apurou a BBC da Universidade de Oxford, a AstraZeneca apenas conseguiu garantir a patente da universidade depois de intensas negociações e de ter acordado produzir as vacinas ao preço de custo durante a pandemia. Se assim é, porque assinou contratos com a União Europeia e com o Reino Unido de forma a manter este preço de custo apenas até junho de 2021. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much, Marisa. I go, of course, first to Pascal Soriot, because there are several questions to AstraZeneca, and then very shortly Moderna and CureVac. Please, Monsieur Soriot.
Thank you so much, Chairman. The first question from Mrs. Modig relates to capacity, and essentially the same response as before is that we are working 24/7 to increase capacity and deliver on this commitment, and we hope that by Q2 we can catch up to where we would like to be. But I think it's important to understand when we entered this agreement with Oxford University, the assumption that the university was using was a yield of 5,000, which means 5,000 doses of vaccine coming out of 1 liter. We took a much lower assumption in our forecast because we wanted to be conservative. But it turns out that some of the sites have delivered this assumption, and some other sites have delivered half of the assumption. And therefore, if you deliver half of the assumption, which is half of the number of doses per liter, then your production is half what you expected. So it's pretty simple. It's just a simple math. If you have a low yield, a low number of vaccines per liter, then you produce less. If we had reached the assumed yield, we would be absolutely on track with our supply. And as I said before, the yield, the productivity is improving, and therefore we believe the volume will grow as we learn, as the sites learn to manufacture. And there are sites around the world that have higher yields, and therefore we are trying to leverage our supply chain globally to help Europe. As far as the contract, as I said before, the contract that matters is the contract we signed in May with Oxford University. And Oxford University innovated a number of agreements the UK government had with the suppliers in the UK, and then one supplier in the Netherlands. As you can imagine, the UK government spent tens of millions of pounds to support the development of the vaccine, and also tens of millions of additional pounds to invest in the plans to scale up the manufacturing. And therefore, they had agreements, and those agreements were innovated to us. So the August agreement is just finalizing some details, but the commitments are already part of the Oxford agreement we signed. So yeah, so that's answered the second question, I think, from Mrs. Matthias. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I go now to Mr. Bancel, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Matthias, for your question, and thank you for your kind words around the IP. So we've done a lot of tech transfer to our partners at different sites of Lonza, and at this time, our team is very constrained to work on ensuring those production issues we talked about, those startup issues, that they are resolved quickly. Those are the same engineers. You know, Moderna, like some other companies on the panel, is a small company. We have 1,300 employees now around the world. And when you take out the clinical team, people in the factories making product, but not the engineers that know how to make the product, our engineering team is quite small. And doing more tech transfer right now will actually put the production and the increase in output for the months to come at very big risk, which I think would be a very unwise decision because it will be really difficult then to get to the next few months of deliveries. So we're very open to look into it in the future once the current sites are well performing, which will take a few months, maybe a few quarters. Thank you for your good question.
Thank you so much. And lastly, I would invite Mr. Haas.
Yes, thank you very much. Coming back to the resale chapter, we have been very transparent to open up the contract in the first place because we think that's exactly the way how it should be. And therefore, you have to read this chapter with research that we need to know where our product is going into, because we are keeping the liability, the indemnification exactly on that product. So as the different national laws certainly provide different kind of preconditions and quality constraints and all of that, we need to know where the product is going. And certainly there will be not a denial of approval in case there is no reasonable reason to ship a product to another country. And so that is exactly, you have to read those two provisions together to say, on the one side, there is an indemnification, a liability for the product we are producing. On the other side, exactly for that reason, we need to know where the product is going into. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you so much. We have another two very relevant committees in the European Parliament, INTA and Budget. So we have one intervention from INTA committee. First, Vice Chair Jan Zahardil. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank on behalf of INTA and on behalf of Chairman Lange for invitation. I would like to appreciate the efforts of all companies and CEOs to produce and to deliver as much as possible, because it's really very crucial. And I have two short questions of rather a legal nature. One is about this new authorization mechanism for vaccine exports introduced by the Commission as a follow-up of reduced vaccine deliveries. Has this mechanism had an impact on your ability to fulfill your contracts or created possible issues in your supply chain? And second question is on intellectual property rights in vaccines and the obstacles they may pose for the rapid vaccination. So what are your plans concerning requirements from so-called TRIPS agreement on compulsory licensing, or rather waiving the compulsory licensing and make it unnecessary, which would speed up the delivery of vaccines? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hardil. And the chair of Budget Committee, Mr. Van Overveld, has the floor now.
Thank you. First for Mr. Bancel of Moderna. Commission President von der Leyen recently said science beats industry, suggesting that there was too much focus on the development of vaccines and an underestimation of what mass production would mean and would cause as potential problems. Do you agree with that analysis? And secondly, you just said in one of your earlier remarks that production is now growing all over the place, but we see in terms of vaccines being applied a remaining gap between the UK and the US on the one end and the EU on the other end, and even a relative increase of that gap. Second question I have for Mr. Soriot, which is based on the recent or increasing evidence that we should focus on the first dose being applied as quickly as possible and forget for the time being with respect to the second dose. Do you agree with that analysis, Mr. Soriot? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair Van Overveld. I go now to the four CEOs to answer the questions in 1 minute, please, and maybe a final word, short word, if you would like to add something. And I start, of course, with Mr. Soriot.
Thank you so much. And first of all, let me thank Mr. Zahardil for thanking us, because we have thousands of employees in all our companies working tirelessly to produce these vaccines. And words of encouragement are suddenly very welcome, because it's very, very challenging for many of them. In terms of the export mechanism, we have implemented it as required by the Commission. And we have actually used it ourselves essentially to export samples to Mexico in that instance. And those samples are sent to Mexico simply to show that the vaccine is manufactured in Latin America is the same as the vaccine manufactured in Europe, so that they can then use our clinical data to get approval in those countries. So this is what we've done it for, and you know, we are quite okay to use this mechanism. We understand fully that EU wants to make sure that it protects itself in terms of getting access to the vaccine. And I'd like to repeat again, in our case, the overwhelming majority of what's made in the EU stays in the EU for EU consumption. In terms of the other question relative to the first dose, I totally agree, at least as it relates to our vaccine. I cannot comment for others, of course, but our data is very clear. And in fact, our data was confirmed by the real-life evidence in Scotland, with more than 1 million people vaccinated. After one single dose, 94% reduction of hospitalizations. So we see a very strong effect. In our clinical trials, after one dose, we see 100% protection against severe disease and hospitalization. And if you include moderate disease together with severe disease, the efficacy after one dose is 75%, and it goes up to 82% after the second dose given 3 months later. So yes, I think the strategy that has been pursued in the UK, which actually was based on data for our vaccine, actually is the right one, and has worked very, very well, because essentially from a public health viewpoint, you want to provide protection to as many people as possible, and then you give them the second dose later, 3 months later, and it enables you to use the quantity you have, which is limited, to protect as many people as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will go now quickly to Mr. Bancel. Also, please, short intervention.
Thank you very much. So to the question from Mr. Van Overveld around investment in development, clinical trial, and manufacturing, I cannot comment for the other companies, obviously, but I can tell you for Moderna, what happened is development, we were helped very much so by the US government. The BARDA agency gave us $1 billion to fund the clinical trial that has been used for approval in Europe as well, which is why, as I said in my remarks, I really congratulate Europe to setting the new agency to be able to fund research in infectious disease. I think it's very important for the future of the world and the future of Europe to have these collaborations. And we were able, as a company, to move very fast with BARDA, because we had been working with them before on the Zika vaccine that they were funding as well. And so we already had the trust and the relationship between the company and the agency. And so I really think that this new initiative in Europe is very positive, and we're going to do everything we can to help it as well. On the manufacturing front, in the case of Moderna, there was a different situation between Europe and the US. In the US, we already had a factory. And so we were able to produce in the US from that factory that existed before. In Europe, as I said earlier, we had no supply chain, no factory at all, because we had no commercial product. And so we tried to get some help, and we're not successful in getting help early in the year, last year, because it was a new technology. And so what we ended up doing is actually to raise money on the capital market by selling stock in the company to investors in May. We raised $1.3 billion that was used to invest in the equipment, hiring people, and the partnership we have in Europe, which is enabling us now to ship products to Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Haas.
Yes, thank you very much. With regard to the export control, yes, we have. This has been hitting us somehow because we couldn't get clinical trial material out to Latin America. This was, but on the other side, we did get then immediate support from the Commission as well as from the German authorities. For rather small companies, as we are, around about 600 people, certainly this adds an extra layer. But again, the support was there immediately. However, we lost a week then to ship the material, which was certainly necessary and is necessary for running the clinical trial. With regard to the waiver, yes, one has to consider, and this is also what I think my colleagues here also said, we have to see that it is not only about the manufacturing process where there is a lot of technology transfer needed in order to do this, know-how, which is in the brains of the people. And as a matter of fact, with all the 20 partners all over Europe, we are doing this is combined with a technology tech transfer. If one goes that way, one has to start also with the starting material and the equipment, which you need in order to facilitate that. And then there will be even more a higher competition on getting these material in order to get our vaccines produced. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Finally, Mr. Sten-Erck.
Yes, thank you. So we have established on 4 different continents the ability to make product so that we have not been impacted by borders so far. And we are assured, we have been assured that the intent of the export mechanism being put in place is not to slow up product. I make the request to make sure that that happens because it's critically important that all of the companies be able to ship product, clinical product, approved product, raw materials around the globe without delays put in place.
Thank you so much, Mr. Erck. I would like to thank to the 4 CEOs for their presence, for their availability, for their openness, for responding to the questions and for the commitments. And we go quickly to the second part with some delay, and we excuse for that. 3 very important pharma companies with very distinguished and important representation, and 1 very relevant institution, global institution.